Welcome back, brothers and sisters. We now move to our next panel discussion. It's on a topic that has gained a lot of traction in recent times. It is, of course, sustainability. Our distinguished panelists will share and discuss how we can continue to take care of our common home in the marketplace and beyond. This discussion will be led by the Catholic Architectural Guild and in the very capable hands of Theodore Chan. Over to you.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Christ at Work panel on sustainability, taking care of God's gift of earth. I am Theodore Chan. I'm an architect and I'm from the Catholic Architectural Guild. And I will be the moderator for this panel, taking care of God's gift, the gift of faith. We are very pleased to have with us our distinguished panelists. We have Father Colin Tan, a Jesuit priest, and he's the parish priest of St. Ignatius Church and the spiritual director of CBN Leadership Program. We also have Mr. Christopher Wu. He's a tax leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers, Singapore, Myanmar, New Zealand, and also Miss Melissa Low, a research fellow in the Energy Studies Institute of the National University of Singapore. And finally, my good friend, Mr. Andrew Keng, head of the administrative section of Tiong Seng Group and chairman of the Pastoral Council of the Church of Divine Mercy. The panel will take turns to present their views on how each individual person in their field of work and in their own personal life can reflect a more sustainable approach towards the earth. For myself, I'm your moderator, and I will begin by kicking off my presentation of my take of this topic. Okay, if you look closely at the UN Sustainable Goals, right, by 2030, all those goals that you see here are being put up by the UN. And you will notice that 7 or 10 out of the 17 goals are actually have to do with the built environment. And this is where we as architects play a very important part. Things like good health and well-being, clean water, affordable clean water, decent work, industry innovations, sustainable architecture. So it has to do a lot with the environment. And putting it down, it comes down to actually 5 very key issues. The issue of energy efficiency, health and well-being, resilience, carbon, of course, cutting down carbon, maintainability in a building, and intelligence application in a building as well. So, together with the architects of Singapore and together with the government, there's a lot of alignment now going on with the Singapore Institute of Architects, with the Catholic Architectural Guild, and of course, the Ministry of National Development. And as I mentioned, it comes down to those 5 items which I mentioned earlier on. And if you take a look at the past, I would say 400 or 500 years of history, the development of economies have always followed the development of technologies. And we are today in what we call the 6th wave of intelligent technologies. So this is where it's our opportunity to actually leverage on these intelligent technologies and environmental technologies, biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, and also healthcare technologies to try to improve the way we live and, of course, the way we take care of our planet. Of the key, I would say that the key drivers of the technologies today, environmental technologies, biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, and healthcare will lead. And we are being supported by digitalization and, of course, the exponential rise in computation of computational power of IT and technology in computers. So I believe we really have the means and the will to actually do it. Right? And really, in this kind of 6 wave thinking, if you want to succeed, you have to do something with waste. Either you cut down on waste and be less excessive, or you recycle waste, right? So waste equals opportunity. And as architects, we don't just design the building, we have to sell the whole service of design and bringing the project right down to fruition, right? And today, the digital and the natural world will converge. I mean, look at this conference we're having. It wouldn't be possible if without digitalization. We have managed to be so technology advanced that we can actually reach the whole world from where we are sitting, right? So the thinking is that we have to start using digitalization to actually save the planets, because bits are global and atoms are local. And of course, we must never lose sight of the greatest inspiration, that is to look to nature for inspiration as designers and as industrialists as well. In Singapore, I'm glad to say that we have made great advances actually. We see a lot of push in the use of new building materials coming out of waste, right? So this is something which I think in time to come we will feature more and more in our buildings, where waste products are turned into building materials that can be used in our construction projects. So let's look at some of the latest trends of architecture these days. I'd just like to highlight this thing called the Pritzker Prize, which if you are an architect, you will know that it is actually almost like the Nobel Prize of architecture. So in 2012, they gave an award to this Chinese architect, Wang Shi, and they gave it to him because of his highly charged and influential work creating great spaces for communities, right? Then later on in 2014, they gave it to this Japanese architect called Shigeru Ban. And he was really instrumental in disaster recovery architecture and helping communities again, right? Then later on, in 2016, right, they gave it to this gentleman, this architect called Alejandro Aravena. And again, his work, very high content with the communities, improving the lives of the common people. And even as late as 2018, they gave it to this this master architect from India, architect Doshi Balakrishna. And again, his work helps people and the rural communities improve their lives. So I think the signal is coming very clearly that as architects, it's not just about grand and beautiful buildings, but buildings that can test the test of time, that have substance, and at the end of the day, the building must make your life better, right? Make the whole community benefit from it. And even now, it's not only just about sustainability, but whether a building can regenerate, right? Not only zero, but put back energy and put back life into the whole environment in which it is set in. And for me, the biggest evidence for this kind of thinking and the biggest wisdom happened in Tokyo, right? For the 2020 Olympics, the stadium, they actually chose a more substance-based stadium over a style stadium, right? And to me, the Japanese are one of the most society that really respects the environment. And for them to take a step like this, it sends a very big signal to all of us that, yes, buildings is important for the building to be stylish, but it is also more important for the building to have substance. So at the end of the day, as architects, we have a role, I would say, to become healers of the built environment. We're looking at holistic wellness in the building environment, climatic response, sustainability, economies of construction, buildings that are productive and buildable, designed for safety, universal access, maintainability, and having a construction method that is very little in creating nuisance, right? So nuisance minimal construction. We have the obligation to use resources and technology responsibly, and of course not to forget that the deep and meaningful beauty of our architecture comes with the rigor of truth, rationale, and logic. And we really have to be evidence-based in our design, meaning to say that if we say that a round column is better than a square column, then we have to show that a round column is better than a square column, right? And not just about totally the pure form of aesthetics, but to concentrate on substance over style. So with that, I think the big question we should ask ourselves is, are we solving the challenges of the day? Because if as architects, we do not solve the challenges of the environment, the built environment especially, then I think we will soon become irrelevant. So this is a question which I hope the panel will discuss, because the panel comes from many walks of life, a Catholic priest, energy expert, Andrew, a contractor, and a finance person in Chris. Okay, so I would like now to pass over the microphone to the first presenter. We now invite Father Colin Tan to give a little more spiritual information about the papal encyclical of Laudato Si. Father Colin, please.
Thank you very much, Theodore, and I'm very pleased to be able to join you this afternoon. All of us are invited to really play a very significant part, no matter how small or how insignificant we think we are, because all of us, we recognize the need for us to participate in the way the world is going to change. The world that we live in continues to be a part of God's creation. And I want to present to you basically how we have to understand the document of Laudato Si that was issued by Pope Francis in 2015, and it was to coincide with the meeting of the world leaders in Paris at that time, in order to urge leaders their role and importance of working together, all the nations in the world, in order to effect change regards to the climate crisis that all of us are so familiar with. We are interested to know that the document has become a landmark document for all of us, whether we are Catholics or not. We know that it has become a rallying call for all of us to work together and to build integral ecology that has a part of how we are invited to recognize the interconnectedness of everything in life, whether it's our environment, whether it's our economics, whether it's our social habits and life. It is about cultural also dimension of our lifestyle, and certainly about the way we also live out our daily lives in our world, in our family. So it is a very important message for all of us to take seriously what we can do in three key areas: integral ecology, the personal conversion, and of the cry of the earth or the cry of the poor. So it is with this that we want to look into how to be able to understand the importance of the 7 goals of Laudato Si, which is also the platform that Pope Francis will be launching after 6 years. He will be launching this platform on the 16th of November, and it calls for every sector of life to participate in this. It will be from families to religious orders to organizations and groups everywhere, to looking at also the economy, to looking at parishes and churches, to look at hospitals as well as educational institutions, to participate in the integral ecology, to make a difference in the way we are going to have a change in our lifestyle, in our ability to be participants in how we can indeed contribute to reducing the climate crisis. And all of us are also aware of the need to look at the 7 goals, which is really the cry of the poor, cry of the earth, the economics of life, how to make sure that we have ecological spirituality, we have ecological education that is needed, and also ecologic economics in terms of how we make sure that we are able to have businesses that are sustainable, that must take into consideration the impact on the environment of sustainable development. And certainly we are invited to also look into the way we as a community, that every one of us has a part to play in effecting change, effecting conversion. And it is with this that we also know that very often it is the poor who often are the victims of climate change. I was listening to a news broadcast recently, and some of the island nations in the world are the ones who will be most immediately affected by rising sea level, such as the islands in Micronesia, in the Seychelles, and they are sometimes just less than a meter above sea level. And they be projecting how this is going to impact their nations. So we must remember that climate change is a crisis affecting everyone in the world, and that we cannot afford to be indifferent to think that it's not going to affect us. So it is very important that we as a church must recognize the need to act, and to act immediately and urgently. And that is the reason why I want to give you a theological basis for us as Christians to respond to this present crisis. I will summarize it in terms of 4 key areas from the book of Genesis. And while the Genesis text may have been interpreted by the Western societies and by even some theologians to understand it as a call to dominate the earth, but when in fact it is a key word called stewardship, or to be guardian of what we have been given. And if you are a guardian, you are asked to protect, you are asked to care, you are asked to love what is given to us. And certainly we know that we have to be very responsible for what has been entrusted to us by God. And one of the parables that is really very helpful for us is the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 onwards. We know that it's about how the owner of the vineyard entrusted that to his tenants. And at the same time, we know that they've been asked to say that, I have given you some talents, 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent. And the one with 5 and 2, they invested it and brought more. Whereas the one given 1 talent said to the master when it was time for reckoning, he said, "Oh, I know that you are a very hard master, so I buried my talent. And here, this is 1 talent that you have given me." And of course, the owner of this vineyard was not very happy with this lazy person. And so it is important to know that stewardship is about the ability to make use of our talents and gifts that have been bestowed on us, and to be caring, to be responsible, to be intelligent, and to be loving. Another area of theological reflection is that we are called to be in solidarity with the poor, and it means that we cannot say it is the poor who will suffer and I don't bother about them, because every one of us is interconnected as a family of God. And this quote from Pope Francis is a call for us to link economics together with politics and with social responsibility. And another important area of theological reflection is for us to change our lifestyle. If there's anything that is important, it's the fact that we can make a difference in not wasting energy, not wasting our own understanding of how we live our lives. Pope Francis always has got a favorite saying: to waste food is to rob from the poor. So this is something that you must experience for yourself, how it is important to know that even Jesus himself, when he performed the miracle of multiplying the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he collected the scraps left over, and it was to tell people that this is something that we should also continue to emulate his example of making sure that we do not waste food, we do not waste energy. Switch off your electricity when you're not using the lights, your aircon, use fan, take public transport then when you drive to save carbon emission and carbon footing. And most of all of us are invited to remember that we have a role to play in participating in the way the world is going to evolve. And some of us might be skeptical to say, "Oh, what can I do?" But the power of one person to change the world is more than you can underestimate. So my dear friends, if we are called to really make a difference, we have to know that it's not about dominion, it's about stewardship for all of us. So it is with this that I want to know, finally, all of us, we know that the goodness of God is the basis for our response. because God saw everything that He created to be good. And if we ourselves can see the goodness that coming from God, then we would certainly want to make sure that we can account for this in our lives, to share with others what God has created in order to bring life and bring goodness to others around us. So my dear friends, it is always a joy for me to be here, and I pray that we will be able to do our bit to care for the earth and to help us to be agents of God's change in the world. So thank you for sharing with me.
So thank you, Father Colin. Lots of parallels that you've mentioned regarding Laudato Si to the environment, of how the architects and everybody in the environmental field can respond to. So I'd like to invite now our next speaker, Ms. Melissa Low, to present the journey of how she, as an energy professional, in her work, how does she see it reflecting the ethos of Laudato Si, professionally and personally. Melissa, please.
Thank you very much, Theodore, for inviting me to this session. So I thought I would begin by introducing myself. And so the first slide here is, sorry, I should go back. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I started my journey at the CHIJ, Toa Payoh. I attended 10 years of school there. Subsequently, I went to Catholic Junior College, even though my grades actually allowed me to go to a better JC. But I had a lot of friends in CHIJ, and I decided to go there. And subsequently, I attended NUS in the geography department, where I did my undergraduate. And I attended my first climate change conference in Copenhagen back in 2009, I believe. And I was a member of the NGO, then a non-governmental organization. And it was really by God's grace that my parents didn't like my work in NGO work, and they decided to help find me a job. And I joined the NUS Energy Studies Institute in 2011, so 10 years ago. And for the last 10, 11 years, I've been doing climate change and energy research up till now. And it's really been a very fulfilling journey for me. I even helped to, with many others also, helped to put NUS on the map, in a sense, where we are accredited now to the UN, FCCC, or the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and I'll come to that a little bit later. During my time at NUS, I also pursued a master's in environmental management, and later on wasn't quite ready for a PhD, so I went to do another master's in climate change law and policy, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD part-time at NUS Geography as well. And I've been very honored, privileged to be called to join a number of councils and to serve in areas of environment, as you can see. But I wanted to share a little bit about what I do on a day-to-day basis, not just doing research, but it's also important to communicate the work that I do. And one significant part of my time is spent on civil society engagement with climate change. And as you can see in the slide here, back in 2009, we had the distinct honor of meeting PM Lee in Copenhagen, and we highlighted to him how youth were interested in climate change, and we wanted the government to do more on climate action. At the time, I didn't really have a mentor. And so the last 10 years have been, for me, trying very hard to build a network of mentorship, and to guide young people. And over the years, we've been very lucky that the ministries in Singapore have been very open to meeting with young people. So under normal circumstances, I would actually be traveling right now to Glasgow to attend the climate conference. But this year, apart from the pandemic, of course, I decided not to go. But also because it saves a lot of emissions by staying put here. And we have a virtual element, so we can actually attend the COP26 online this year. So I decided not to go, but I have actually accredited a number of young people who are on their way and who will be fighting for more climate action around the world. And I'm also very, very thankful that yesterday, as we were doing our dry run, actually the Pope Francis issued another call, a renewed call to action, and he went even on the BBC podcast to share about how the world leaders must do more and come to conclusion at COP26. but I believe it's just a means to an end. The COP26 conference is meant to finalize some of the Paris Agreement outcomes and the rule book so that we can get on with it and start implementing the Paris Agreement. I want to move very quickly to the next bit where, wanted to share a bit about my work, which is to look at Singapore's climate change targets. So it's important for us to know these targets and to hold those who ought to be accountable to these targets. And to, I guess I would say it's important to know these because if you don't understand the metrics by which we measure our carbon emissions, then we cannot really start to manage them very well. So under the Paris Agreement, what I just want to highlight here is that Singapore, like all countries, will have to update our targets every 5 years, right? And so the latest target that we have set out for ourselves is to peak our carbon emissions at 65 million tons CO2 equivalent around 2030. If this doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry. It took me a while also to understand all of this. And again, I'm not trained in the sciences or math, so I'm trained in geography, so this is difficult for me. But it is important, right? And we also aim to halve our emissions in the longer term to just 33 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And every 5 years, Singapore, like all countries, will have to update our emissions trajectories so that we keep in line with the science. And so I think this year especially is very timely. We are in the window of opportunity that we can renew our target. And one thing I would just say that it is going to be very challenging because big countries like China and India have not submitted new targets ahead of the COP26. So we anticipate a fairly big fight, I guess you could say, between the North and South. Okay, last slide here. So I just wanted to share that what this means for Singapore is that we have to transform ourselves in every single way, right? Both all in industry, economy, and society. It's not just the hardware that needs to be transformed, infrastructure. I think Theodore mentioned a lot about the built environment earlier, but we also have to transform the economy. And I believe later on we also have Chris who will be talking about the economic sector. But I think what's most important for me in my work and how I translate the work that God has entrusted me to, the talents that Father Colin talked about, is really how to raise awareness and build awareness among society and change the hardware, the software of society, and accept that there will be costs involved when it comes to reducing our carbon emissions as we live in an increasingly carbon-constrained world. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting me here, and I look forward to a discussion later.
Thank you, Melissa. So heartening to see young people getting on board this sustainability drive. So young people, the future of the world, the hope is there, right? So I wish more young people will come forward to change the advocacy of the world for a more sustainable planet that we're going to have. So next, I would like to invite Chris. Chris is a finance professional. More exact, he's a tax professional working in the finance industry with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yes, yeah. So this is I've always wondered, how can the finance people contribute to this this whole challenge of sustainability? So to enlighten us on this, I hand over the presentation to Chris.
Thank you, Theodore. Firstly, let me clarify that I'm not looking after New Zealand. The NZ stands for net zero. Oh, okay. So I'm looking after the net zero efforts for PwC in Singapore in terms of what we're trying to do. So thank you very much for having me. I'm really honored to be in this part of this distinguished panel. But I also just want to maybe start off by saying, certainly in terms of what Father Colin shared in terms of Laudato Si, the key word I took away from it is on the stewardship side. So the stewardship element very much resonates with us in the business community and definitely in the finance community. And just now Melissa touched on, I think, a lot of measurements and accountability. I think that's very key in terms of this journey we have, us taking on board as Christians, us forwarding the message of Laudato Si as well. So I'm going to try and relate as much as I can around how the business world and Laudato Si fit together very well. So with that, let me start off with the first slide. This is just, I suppose, something which all of us have been hearing. The acronym of ESG, which stands for the environmental, social, and governance elements, which very much resonates again with Laudato Si, because it makes us accountable, it makes it measurable in terms of what we're supposed to do, and of course to make sure that then we can achieve the goals which are set by the Holy Father in terms of us trying to be better stewards of the environment and of people and of the greater good. So as you can see that in terms of this chart, that the world is obviously, we're going through massive changes, not only just an environment, there's COVID-19, technology is making great advancements, but it's also creating issues, like we experienced even this morning, inequality, and of course, societal expectations, for example, around social media. So it's all accountable under these three headings in terms of the environment, in terms of us being better stewards of the natural environment. So I had those words in before. Father Colin mentioned those words as well. So the stewardship is there, which is very important. The social, what it means in terms of our relationship with employees, whether or not we're encouraging diversity and inclusion, our customers, suppliers, and of course the greater community. Governance, what does this mean? Well, it means to being accountable as leaders, accountable in terms of following certain policies and practices which are acceptable in today's society, and being again held true to it. All this gives rise to various risks and opportunities as well, and I'm going to go through that in a little while. So maybe what I'll do is a quick lesson in terms of the measurement around the environmental side, right? In terms of the emissions of all these harmful gases, which are highlighted on top, there are three reporting areas, right? In terms of one, the direct side, what you as a company or individuals will be doing, what we do in terms of the upstream activities, how we buy, what kind of energy we buy, for example, and even our output in terms of the indirect side. What are our products and services which we do? How are they harming the environment? So it covers the full gambit of everything that we do, and how it's very important to take into account the impact of it into the environment. So as you can see, there's an increasing number of global companies and organizations going on this journey in terms of Laudato Si, in terms of the net zero carbon or low carbon journey. PwC is no different. As I said, I'm responsible for driving this in Singapore. What we're trying to do is, for example, reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030, to purchase 100% renewable electricity, to work with our clients to make sure that they too can come on board onto this journey with us, and to advance the thinking in terms of our engagement at a policy level. Natural climate solutions are a key part of the Laudato Si and the journey towards net zero. Basically what it is supporting natural climate solutions such as preservations of forests or even reforestation efforts. And that gives rise to what people have been hearing in terms of carbon credits. And these carbon credits are basically representations of what these projects are doing to absorb the harmful gases from the environment. So as you can see in this chart, I just wanted to pull together, and you recognize a Singapore one, in terms of what Dylan, as the CEO of Temasek, has shared, that they really want to change the corporate environment and to do better in terms of all the various efforts and through their various investments. So as you can see, it's not only in Temasek, but all these global investment companies as well. There are strong ambitions from the investment community, and we can do our part where we are either part of these finance companies, or we are also investing on our own. So again, another chart with just a lot of details here in terms of the strong focus on the ESG investing. In interest of time, I'll move on. There's also an accountability here in terms of how we make our capital work for us in terms of driving forward the ESG message. We can use it to further a lot of causes and see how the companies which we're investing in are furthering the efforts here in terms of, again, lowering the carbon footprint and helping to reverse the destruction which has come about. Melissa has touched on this in terms of Singapore's overall green plan, so I'll move on. I just want to touch on tax. It would be remiss of me as a tax leader not to talk about tax. Where many people think of tax as being something, I don't want to pay, it's a cost. But think about it in terms of it contributing back to society. Jesus does command us in the Bible to pay our taxes, and it's for a very good reason. The taxes are used by governments to help to educate, to provide health care, and now also carbon taxes are there to help to reduce the carbon footprints as well. I'll finish off with one slide around, this slide is where it tries to represent how in our business workplace, whatever we do, whether it's in architecture or construction, ESG headwinds can cause value to be eroded, right? But at the same time, if you switch your strategy to factor in ESG, you can then start to preserve value through performance improvements. Best of all, and I think you've heard this many times in terms of what the government has said about how we can actually unlock value. Unlock value in terms of taking on new services, new goods which are environmentally friendly. We can build brands and we can create greater awareness into this common good which we as Christians now know, as Catholics, as Laudato Si. So with that, I end my piece.
Thank you, Chris, for enlightening us on the business world, on how sustainability is affecting the business world. Good to know that all the big companies are coming on board, and I think that is because they believe that the minds are changing, the consumers' minds are changing, and therefore the green products or the green services will be the one that will be taking off. Also good to remind us about paying taxes. Now when I pay my tax, I won't feel so painful. They're actually helping the environment and the government. Okay, next up we have my good friend Andrew. Andrew is a construction giant. Okay, he has been at the leadership of Tiong Seng Construction, one of the leading contractors in Singapore. So if there's anybody who can tell you about how the construction industry is moving towards more sustainable things, it is Andrew. So over to Andrew, please.
Thanks, Theodore. I'm very humbled to be here, and I think that you know that we are all in the construction for so long, and we have picked up many good practices that we are able to share. But as we have always been in the industries for so long, we never thought that some of these small and best practices can also be shared with the church itself, because a lot of us think that the church, the priests, or the secretariat can actually do it. But I think it is us. We ourselves must also take some leadership or take some of this and actually start it. So having said that, I actually being the PPC chair, I actually looked at Laudato Si, and when I started Laudato Si, that was back in 2019. I didn't know what to expect, but of course, slowly in time, I actually gathered a lot of momentum. As I can share with you now, these are so-called practices that we have done in the church. And just to give you an example is that, Jesus has his parables and CDM has his practicals. So here you can take a look at some of this, and perhaps, some of this can be actually shared with the other churches in Singapore or around anywhere. Yeah. So as you know that Laudato Si has 7 goals, but I think the UN climate has 17. So between 7 and 17, I think Laudato Si has picked the 7 goals that were actually closer to our practices in our Bible. Okay, so what did we do then was I actually discussed with the parish priest, and we actually did a launch, Laudato Si launch. And surprisingly, I think many of the parishioners do not really have that understanding of what Laudato Si is. At that point of time, 2019, I mean, the Pope has actually launched the encyclical many years back, and nothing was really ever mentioned in church itself. So henceforth, we actually did a launch, and we not only the launch, but we also had a movie, and we also have a spiritual director talking about it. So that was the first creation of how this Laudato Si actually started. And then, of course, Laudato Si comes with the 7 goals. And the 7 goals are very simple: community engagement and participatory actions. You have seen that we have done the launch. But then we also look at, we are in a throwaway culture. We have everything that we need, and yet we stack it aside, and then after that, we throw it away. So here we look at even curtains, even bed sheets and all that. And we started a community whereby people come along, and they come with their sewing machines sometimes, and some of these, they come just for the fun of it, just to learn how to do cutting of the cloth and all that. And you can see that from there we actually create tote bags. And this one is actually, it's called moss bags because this moss bags actually started in UK. And it has been around the world. So Singapore, we are also one of those that actually subscribe to this moss bags. And why do we do this moss bags is because we wanted to exchange it with plastic bags. So people can come and just pick it up free without any cost to them. Then of course, we also need to respond to the cry of the earth. And how do we do it? And you can see that we also need to reduce carbon footprint. And our church, we so-called all our decorations, we plant it ourselves, and we don't even have any flowers on ordinary Sundays or weekdays, because we actually subscribe to reducing carbon footprint. And we also do recycling, of course, and at the same time, these recycled products or items like bottles and all that, we reuse it to make it an object. Because there was this lady that we have, she's very creative, and one of the items that she can do is actually displayed in the center of this an object. And it's a very beautiful thing that, do not waste your talent, because we all have talents, and if we don't do it, no one else will do it. I'm actually showcasing this one is a response to the cry of the poor. This lady is very, very inspiring. She's a very silent worker, but we actually have her going around. Whoever wants to throw away things, she says, "Hey, don't throw anything away. Give it to me," because I think end of the day, she's able to recycle and actually repackage it, so that the poor in either Philippines or elsewhere do have such things that they can actually get it from us. Ecological economics. I think down here, what we are trying to display is that a lot of us, we have plants, but a lot of them, the plants die. And we always tell our parishioners, if you need plants that needs to come for reviving, we will revive it. And here, we also do a lot of plants on the roof to actually to reduce the temperature on the rooftop, so that our aircon and our electrical bill won't go haywire. Adoption of a simple lifestyle. We have our own home cook team that cooks everything on a Sunday, except now we have COVID, so we don't have this. But the idea was to actually look at two things. Here is one, we eat right. By eating right, we are actually not taxing our body. So this is simple lifestyle, simple way. The food that we cook is cooked out of love, not from a storeholder that doesn't even have any relationship to our church. And we also subscribe to getting utensils that is biodegradable, and of course BYO, bring your own. ecological education. This one has very good relations to just now the simple lifestyle, because we do dementia talk, because I realize that we also have this group, a small group or maybe a larger one, I'm not sure, that has dementia, and we do this talk is because to create the awareness for their loved ones, so that when any of these changes in their moods or in their lifestyle, they might really know and understand that it could be something more serious than the normal. This one, ecological spirituality, what we are looking at is not about the environment, not about the human, but we also look at the all living things. And here we also have blessings of the pets, just to give that kind of comfort for people during this time, where in the COVID times we also need therapy, and sometimes even small little things like this helps. So with this, I'm going to pass it back to Theodore, and I thank you, and I hope you enjoy the slides that we have.
So thank you, Andrew, for a very refreshing perspective. So you can see that even coming down from being a very high level construction professional, the things we learn in our career, we can distill it down to our parish, and even implement programs that like you have done, and they're really excellent for community building, and to just know that the whole idea of wellness and ecology and sustainability. And I like the angle that you took about having dementia talks as well, because at the end of the day, even our environment has to be very universal to all kinds of people, not just people who are ambulant, but disabled people and people who are unhealthy as well, not so healthy people, right? So a very universal take on it. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so now we have you've heard the various views coming from very varied professionals in the industry. At the same time, also, I would say that Father Colin is a professional as well, right? Because I've always felt that, being a priest is one of the most difficult things to be, and I thank you for it, Father Colin. So I'll try to now field some questions here. The first question is for Mel. So the question for you, Mel, is Laudato Si talks about how the poor are most affected by climate change. How can Singapore help the poorer nations?
Oh, thank you, Theodore, for the question. Thank you for the audience member who asked it. Yes, so Singapore is helping just our immediate neighbours alone. We have a something called CDRIF, which is a disaster risk insurance facility that Singapore is helping to contribute towards, and I believe it includes most of the least developed countries in the ASEAN region. So Singapore is one of those countries where we are advanced developing. Right, and it's slightly political here, where we have not graduated into a developed country, at least as far as the UN goes. What that means is that we don't contribute to climate finance globally, because the world has agreed that that role is saved for the developed country and the industrialized countries to help. But of course, when you look at the immediate neighbors and the situation, particularly during the when they have some disasters, right? Whether it's naturally caused, like typhoons, or if you think about the earthquakes in this region, the volcanic eruptions, Singapore definitely goes to help. When it comes to climate change, I believe we are doing the best we can. One of the interesting ways I've seen Singapore do this is through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Singapore Cooperation Program. And earlier we had former Minister George Yeo, who was the Foreign Affairs Minister. I think that's one of the best ways Singapore does it. We actually bring foreign senior officials to come to Singapore and to train and learn about our urban development strategy, how to do waste management and water management, among other things. And then they go back and apply it, or try and apply it to their own context, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution to climate change. And I think that's a few of the ways that Singapore has helped poorer countries.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's not just about giving financial aid to the country, but actually to have exchange programs, about giving them our know-how and our systems and our institution, because I think we are very good at that, creating systems and institution, right?
If I could also add,
sure, of course.
add to that. Actually, many people don't realize that when you purchase carbon credits which are nature-based solutions, you're actually giving the money back into projects which actually help the ecosystem, including the community around, let's say, a forest, which you're either trying to preserve, or an area which you're trying to reforest in terms of growing back the forest. A lot of the money is actually collected by non-profit organizations, which then pump it into these projects, be it a forest in Kalimantan or in Philippines. And the community actually benefits from that, because obviously you need labor to help with all the forest preservation work as well. So carbon credits, from that respect, serve two purposes. Of course, then the forest also serves to, as I said, absorb carbon dioxide, but at the same time, the money does go into the community as well. And they are, most of them are run through non-profit organizations.
Yep, good point, Chris. So next question is for Father Colin. In the course of your religious work, have you encountered people of other religions and other faiths who adopt principles of Laudato Si?
Yeah, it's very important to recognize that when the Pope Francis launched the Laudato Si encyclical, he addressed it to people, all people of goodwill. So it definitely includes people who are of other religious faith as well. And for myself, I know that I always try to have good relationship with the members of the inter-religious organization, with the Muslims. You know, we are on good terms with them, and we have some friendly kind of exchange. During their Buka Puasa, they will invite us to have a meal with them. And then during their fasting month, they also delivered some dates, boxes of dates to us. And recently, when they also celebrated the Ramadan, we gave them boxes of fruits. So I think this is just a beginning of forging a good relationship, and to help each other perhaps also be able to launch common projects eventually. In fact, these are all possibilities that we can build on. I know that some of the Buddhist organizations are very much into also looking at how to be more compassionate, how to care for the earth. So I think we can do more definitely with other religious organizations in Singapore. But I know that in Malaysia, there is a conference called the CJC, the Climate Justice Conference, set up under the Bishops' Conference of Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. They have been also working with other religious organizations, with the Muslim, the MUIS, and so on. Yeah. So I think is one area that we can certainly have more common platform to launch projects together.
Yeah, thank you for the call in. I don't think the Catholic Church has the monopoly on Laudato Si, right?
Yeah, precisely.
It's something that applies to the whole of humanity. And I believe all great religions will teach you not to waste and to care for the other person, right? Very simple paradigm. So next question for Andrew. Was it difficult for the Church of Divine Mercy to find support in the parish to start the Laudato Si committee? Do you have any advice for other parishes trying to start similar initiatives?
There will always be resistance, okay? Because it's something new. But I think over a period of time, being Catholics, we are always also quite forthcoming. So what we do is we go out, sometimes we encourage, sometimes we pinpoint and say, can you join us? Some people say, oh, cannot, I have this and that. But I think end of the day, it doesn't take many, but it just takes some. Initially, when we started this program, it was a bit challenge because I myself and even the parish priest, we do not know how acceptable is this Laudato Si, and over a period of time, of course, people with different interests comes in and participate, because Laudato Si is not about just one item. It's an integral ecology of things. So that's why when we do it in such a way that anybody who has different talents comes in and help us. And Laudato Si for us in CDM is not about a ministry. It's not about a group, but it's an individual coming in to showcase what you can do and come in to take the lead sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. So maybe we can give them your number afterwards. They can call you for some first-hand advice, yeah?
No problem. Anytime. Yeah.
Could I just add to that, because it concerns parish, and I mentioned to you earlier about the importance of drawing in everyone's participation and community engagement to really make a difference. And of course, it helps if you do have the parish priests who have green fingers and who have perhaps a green mind, and who perhaps believe in becoming green warriors, Even if that is not the case, I would say that, you're as individual parishioners, you do have a right to initiate ministries like this, even though you don't call it a ministry. But it is important to know that you can be empowered. And where you are, you're already supported by the Pope in terms of his documents. And certainly as individuals, we are citizens of the earth. We have a right to be able to say enough is enough. It's time for us to act, and it's time for us to really stand up to challenge leaders throughout the world to commit themselves to really making a difference to the climate crisis that we are facing today. I think one image that sometimes you remember Greta Thunberg said was about the fact that the house is really on fire, and you leaders are still talking about how much money to make, and but quarreling with each other, who is responsible for the fire. So I think she's got a real point in terms of how we must remember that we are in this together. We have only one planet. I don't think we can escape to another planet, like maybe some scientists, Stephen Hawking was talking about building another civilization. But I think that might be a little bit far-fetched. For us, I think we have to be responsible, and we can make a difference. I think that is a key conviction as Christians. We can change our lifestyle. We can certainly engage the whole community to make a difference.
Thank you, Father Colin, for that religious perspective on it. It's fantastic. Chris, you have anything to add to that? No. Okay. So there's a question for me here. Can you describe more about how the construction industry can respond more to the safety and welfare of construction workers? Yeah, so I think the question is asking how can we make work life safer for the construction workers? And the answer to that is automation, building automation. I think Andrew will tell you. We have started, Singapore construction industry, yes, we have started to have prefabricated components in buildings, whereby these building components are built in a factory. And when they are completed, they are more or less assembled on the construction site rather than built on the construction site. So when that happens, and with the aid of robotics and all this, which I believe in time to come will be more and more present in the construction industry, this is the way you can actually make work life safer for the construction workers on site. However, I have to warn you that at the start, buildings are going to cost more. So this is the price we'll have to pay, because automation is not cheap, right? Right now, why people are not resisting automation is because the cost of a Bangladeshi worker or a Myanmarese worker coming to Singapore is still much cheaper than having a robot. But I think a day will come where we'll have to make the right choice, right? So yeah, this is something that the economy has to balance with. Andrew, you want to add anything to that?
We are in the same industry, so I agree with Theodore in terms of automation, and we are also moving to digitalization. It is true, because I think even when we look at foreign workers on site, most of them, you'll be probably under the sun or standing 20-30 stories up, and that's not safe. That's definitely not safe. So the mindset change is to actually use DFMA to actually start your manufacturing in the factory, so that when we transport things out, it's already semi completed. And the way that we are moving forward, I think currently, because of the COVID itself, we are also facing a lot of manpower issues, and And I think one of the solutions is probably what Theodore says, the PPVC standards, or even the doing the 3D kind of construction. That will actually try to cut down on the loss of time on site if there is a safety breach, and of course the inclement weather also. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thanks. Okay, so I think we have time for just one question. So let's give it to the young people, the future of our country and the world. So question for Melissa. How can youth be better engaged with climate change initiatives?
Thank you, Theodore. I'll be very quick with this one. So I think the first thing is to go and read up about what climate change is about. But also one thing that I mentioned in my presentation earlier is about learning how to communicate with the other parties that you have to communicate with, the stakeholders. And everyone has a different set of interests. And the earlier you can figure out how to come to bring people to a landing zone about the trade-offs, I think we will inch towards progress on climate action. And so the reality for me is that in order to engage with young people, every year there's a growing age gap, right? So I also need to go and learn the lingo of the Gen Zers and everything. But one thing is to just have the mindset that we all need to play our part, and nothing is anybody else's problem. So yeah, with that, I'd like to thank everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we close the discussion now. So big takeaway that is that yes, while we dominate the earth as the dominant species, but we dominate as stewards. Okay, remember that we are stewards, and stewards take care of the home, take care of the earth, right? And the other concept of yes, we are the lead species, but also remember the finest concept given by our Lord Jesus Christ himself, the idea of being a servant leader. So if we have that kind of attitude, if we have unwasteful kind of thinking, right, and know that the simple fact is that it really comes down to the simple decisions that you make daily, whether you want to buy that new mobile phone if you don't need it, or whether you want to buy the new car, why not just renew your COE instead, right? Yeah, simple decisions like that. So thank you very much. It leaves me to thank our very distinguished panel, Father Colin, Melissa, Chris, and Andrew. And I'm signing off here. I'm Theodore from the Catholic Architects Guild. And this session was actually co-organized with the Catholic Business Network. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.
A big thank you to Theodore and all the panelists there. Indeed, all of us have a role to play, and every little bit that we do counts. All of us can make a difference. So a bit like what we shared this morning when we said all of us can do great acts, or rather, we can do loving acts, small acts with great love, okay? Likewise, we can all care for our environment in small ways, but all those small ways and all of us quite little, humble people put together can make a big difference.
Dear friends of CBN, as you know, CBN is not a funded organization, and we run all our programs and services free of cost. We depend on your donations and love offerings to keep our programs going. Kindly help us with your love offerings by using the QR code and your banking app using Scan to Pay, or you can send us checks or bank transfers as per the instructions here. Thank you and God bless. Thank you for tuning in to Catholic Business Network Christ at Work Conference. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button. And if you're new to our channel, do follow us on all our social media platforms and click on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get a notification whenever we post a new video. Thank you and God bless.